Hi everyone, I'm Michael, founder of Empath and sales expert for Picora. And today we're going to hear an incredible story about growth from one of Berlin's on-the-rise fintechs, Upvest. Today with me in the studio is someone that has an incredible story to tell of their journey, having been one of the initial people at Upvest when they began. Alex, I'd love to give it over to you to quickly introduce yourself to the audience.
Yeah, very much so. Thank you for the invite, Michael. As you said, I've been at Upvest for 8 years by now and leading the growth team. In our context, it's everything from marketing over to sales, including also the revenue operations side. And yeah, it's been quite an interesting journey. We've come a long way, starting more in the crypto space, but now being essentially the backbone for investment applications. So our mission as a company is making investing as easy as spending money, not from a D2C angle. So we don't have an end-user facing product or anything like that. We are the infrastructure in the back that enables our customers such as Revolut, N26, also DKB to offer very modern and competitive investment propositions.
That's amazing. And I would lie right now if I said that Upvest wasn't all over my newsfeed. You guys feel like every week you're making an incredible headline, an incredible fundraise announcement, an incredible, testament to growth. So it's a good maybe start, kick off this kind of conversation around that topic actually of growth. In the world of fintech, how would you define growth from your kind of context?
Yeah, very good question, and also something that I need to deal with on a daily basis because especially from the financial institutions, so the more established banks and asset managers, etc., the question always comes like, what is growth in your context? It's a relatively new term. It has been coined mostly on the D2C side, right? If you look at companies like Facebook, etc., with growth hacking initiatives. For us, it's more a very end-to-end holistic function over along the entire client journey. So that goes from initial awareness to qualifying a client. So essentially seeing, can we support the client with the problem that they are trying to solve, and are we the right fit? To the solutioning, then the launch phase, obviously the agreement, and then retention and expansion. So it's really the end-to-end from first contact to hopefully a long-lasting partnership.
That's amazing, because I think in terms of growth overall, right, a lot of people would say growth as being just a revenue number that you obtain or maybe a milestone you reach as a business. But I love to hear your response, because you capture growth from a customer holistic kind of point of view. So if you could think about maybe in your journey of growth right now, maybe there's anything about the growth story you've had that you want to mention to people that they might be more aware of, or maybe something unique about your growth story that you feel is worth anyone kind of listening in might want to hear.
Yeah. So for us, the ultimate goal of the growth function is creating repeatable revenue that can be pretty accurately forecasted. It's not so easy because Upvest doesn't have an enormous volume of clients. Like, we don't speak to 1,000 firms at a time. Like, it's really a small amount of firms. And this inherently creates a lump risk. So obviously, if you're only talking to so many clients or potential clients at the same time, predictability goes a bit down, right? But still, you want to create measures of transparency and redundancy with your approach, that you are essentially still creating some sort of forecastability for the firm, for management, and essentially for the steering also of the product priorities, etc. So that's always been a challenge, and it's something that we are solving or working on solving a lot from the RevOps side with creating that data transparency. And also obviously on the sales side with making sure that our very standardized approach and really push on the fundamentals allow us to create more efficiency, so that one salesperson can just handle more deals over time without compromising on the client experience. Because in this trusted B2B sales environment of selling a financial product, you can never compromise on trust or basically the level of support that the client would get, because if this is not there, the client would simply not choose you as a vendor.
Yeah, I think that is spot on, right? And I think for customers to be able to pick, they have to feel trust, especially in your world of providing investment infrastructure, providing, in the whole investment space as a whole. Having trust is probably one of the pinnacle elements. So we have a lot of really great stuff to talk about today. I want to take us back now to maybe a time when Upvest had been getting started, which you were obviously a part of, and talk a little bit about what really it took back then to win some of the logos and the big, names that you now have under your belt, all the effort that kind of goes into that. To just have some context, the hardest part of a startup or a scale up at this stage is always proving that you can provide something before having the proof point, especially in banking, regulated industries, investment industries, right? And you are, in my opinion, one of the amazing examples of a startup that was able to capture a pretty difficult market and with a product that's pretty trust-based and regulatory compliance heavy. So going back in time, tell me about that beginning period of winning that first maybe big logo or some of the efforts it took for you to kind of get that first win under your belt.
Yeah. In the beginning, and also to a large degree even today, every initiation of a client conversation, it is never about selling, right? It's about sparring on a problem. It's about understanding where the client is, the potential client, and where they want to go over time, how they want to leverage your solution. So as you rightly say, we had the challenge, especially 4 to 5 years ago, where we didn't have licenses for the businesses that we were selling because we were in the license application process, which took a lot of time, and we were just ramping up the infrastructure. So to fill that gap of, again, trust, because swapping out your infrastructure is like an operation at the open heart, like without it, nothing works. And you ideally want to have someone with like references, which we now have, but which we didn't have back then. We filled that trust gap with especially like three core cornerstones of our approach. One was really making sure that every interaction is valuable for the client. So we knew what we were talking about, right? Like we had a very clear plan of what we are going to build, how the first launch archetype would look like, and would have also to very detailed questions already the answers because we had done our homework, right?
Yeah.
Second one being on the personal level, so would be close to the decision makers across various teams, addressing concerns super early. Before they would become any sort of problem. Then last but not least, we were de-risking it. So obviously not pushing a huge migration or a larger client first, but starting a little bit smaller with more agile firms, looking at facilitating new products for them. So a greenfield approach versus a bigger migration in the beginning. This sort of combination of those three factors led to the success of building up logo by logo. And after a couple of fintechs that we've worked with, Revolut was among the first 5 clients.
That's amazing.
And 26 came into the mix. We now have Openbank as a client and are working on the DKB integration migration, which is pretty big. Actually, how did you solve that at Mambo or Tokyo?
That's a really good question back because I think I was going to say this problem you have or had compared to the one we faced with Mambu was exactly very similar. I mean, Mambu was a core banking platform that was, penetrating regulated financial industry at the time. And I think a lot of the reason I feel really, excited about the Upfest story is because it feels really similar to that second year I had at Mambu. We had a very similar approach where we had to make sure every interaction delivered some level of value. It couldn't just be a demo. It couldn't just be a workshop that just checked a couple boxes. We really had to understand the people of each different bank. Beyond that as well, I mean, we were dealing with multiple different geographies, personality traits, types. So it was extremely difficult for us to even adapt to what a French bank versus a German bank versus a UK bank, which I'm sure in your world, you're also facing this. So we really overcame that, very similar. And I believe we also really overcame that by finding which company or customer we could win that would unlock the German bank and its German banking market. And that's why it's interesting that you said number 26, because that was one of our first key wins back then as well, which unlocked the whole regulated German market for us. So I love that you've going through something similar because I feel the success of Mambu is, been from a lot of those traits that we had, where eventually we reached a, 5 billion valuation over 5 years. And you are absolutely on that track as a business. So I'd love to still stay on this for one more second now, talk a bit more about, you were in the front line as well, dealing with these banks, trying to convince them. I would say, what were some of the behaviors or the traits of maybe yourself or the people around you that you worked with that really was necessary to make that early phase actually work and happen?
Yeah, I think one key piece is besides this being technically a sales process with another firm, you always need to look at the value that your potential client creates to the end users, right?
Yeah.
So you always start with the end user, even in B2C sales, right?
Yeah.
Must have been pretty similar to Mambu, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we're not asking anyone to change their infrastructure because it's a, exciting project or fun or whatever, right?
Yeah.
It takes some proper risk appetite to some degree, because obviously you could do something else with the capacity at a time, and it takes hence just a little bit of effort and monetary commitment as well. So the people must understand what's in it for them, right? And we have really good arguments, because the investment infrastructure currently is so outdated that investment products are costly. From your UX point of view, are nothing when it comes to like real time user experience, etc. So there's very good reasons to change the infrastructure. But yeah, it's a big step to take. So the impact needs to be big for our clients in order to make that decision. And I think this is something that we focus on super early, to tell everyone that on the infrastructure of Upvest, you can now create securities accounts within a second. You can trade every sort of asset fractional from €1.
Yeah.
You can essentially build a super competitive product in a competitive market just within a couple of months instead of years.
That's interesting, right? Because I think what I would love to maybe ask as a kind of side question to this, if you're open for it, of course, is around how you kind of uncovered really what value you were delivering your clients or your prospects. Because I imagine in the world of Upvest, there's a lot you can provide your customers, right? Especially when you're in the beginning stages, people are thinking, okay, investment infrastructure, I need regulated investment products, custodial services, you name probably a whole more than I would even probably know, right? So I guess, how did you along this journey, as you begun, winning a few more customers and such, how did you really uncover what people were wanting to work with you on? Because right now, I think you have a pretty clear and concise value proposition. And I would imagine that maybe in the past you had some work to get to this point. So yeah, if anything you want to kind of share for anyone that might even be going through that same challenge.
Yeah, it surely would be the aspect of talking to the clients in depth, ideally to some degree in person, having a whiteboarding session, understanding how it operationally works, right? Like not every potential client is open to that, but the ones who are, usually also gain a lot of knowledge out of it, right? Because we also see a lot of things in the market. So you can compare where a current firm is currently at and where they could be at, right?
Yeah.
So taking all these learnings together, you obviously develop some sort of prioritization, and this prioritization then leads into a product roadmap. Yeah. Now for Upvest, the initial build was relatively clear. Like in order to have an investment product, you need to have a brokerage element, so executing and of orders basically, settlement component, and then the custody component, so the securities accounts. Without that, it doesn't work. And it's also pretty clear that you need ETFs and stocks. Yeah. So this was kind of easy. I mean, it was super difficult to build, but there wasn't much of a how do we prioritize now. Where it becomes much more complex right now, also with like the enhanced funding and bigger size of the team, is to understand what to build next, right? To stay close to the client, but still in a way where we can be a solution consultant, also push back at times. If you would say yes to every single request, basically would probably get nowhere, right? So for us, we need to keep our infrastructure still scalable, standardized, and basically also make our clients aware of important choices to take. Yeah. Maybe one example there is one classic discussion that we always have with larger banks who already have a big book of business is the amount of exchanges that you need. So not visible to the end user, or not necessarily visible to the end user. If you place an order for a stock or an ETF, it's executed at some sort of at some sort of exchange or market maker. And existing banks usually have a very broad book, like 20 or 30 of these. Trade Republic essentially has one and one fallback.
Wow.
And it's super successful with this one approach because everything is super slim. The end user anyways doesn't care so much, right? So while we are building out our exchange connectivity, it's also about if someone approaches us and tells us, yeah, Upvest, sorry, you can't help us. You don't have the 30 exchanges. Telling them to start first principles with the values. Do your users actually need this coverage or not? And this way having the sales organization sort of as a guard keeper for the rest of the organization, not to commit to too much complexity, which would slow us down in the building otherwise.
That's an amazing example, Alex, because I think I wanted to ask about the sales team right now before kind of moving into, again, back into the hindsight. So on the sales team right now, I would imagine that, if you're a salesperson in Upvest, you probably have a very highly regarded role because you are dealing with some of the most complex challenges in the space. You are, having to work on a really innovative solution and such. So what I was going to ask is about the current sales motion, or maybe the current sales team, or however you feel is an area that you want to go into, just around what might be some things that need to take place in your sales motion, in your sales team, that are necessary to be able to really, like you said, work with these prospects, instill this trust with them, make sure you can capture all these really key things that are necessary to handle the sales cycles. So if there's anything there that you feel you want to share, I'd love to give you the chance to kind of enlighten.
Yeah, would also be curious what you have done in Mambo and Tokyo, because it must have been quite similar. But what we are heavily focusing on as a first step is giving our AEs basically the playbook to even have a chance in this market, right? And the playbook consists of mostly two things. One is very deep briefings on our solution and what it entails.
Nice.
Sales at Upvest is even more, it's almost more of a consultancy job in the end, right? Because you need to have super in-depth knowledge about everything that happens on actually the infrastructure side, right? So it's a complex problem to sell. If you don't understand it, if you wouldn't understand the value and you can't consult anyone, essentially not trustworthy for a client.
Totally.
Right? So understanding is first. And the second one is the client journey. So there's a couple of recurring workshops that we see with every sort of client. Probably also no big news for your audience, but there must be a very proper discovery workshop before you can jump into solutioning. There's the API demo. There's a lot of ins and outs around commercials on information that you better collect before you present the pricing, etc., etc. And these touch points are mostly standardized, right, based on the learnings that we had over all the years, and hence enable AEs to onboard fast and sell efficiently.
That's amazing, because I think, and I'll be happy to share my story too, but one thing before I do, I think it's really, you're right, you mentioned the word consulting, and for complex solutions like yours, you did the right move, in my opinion, of focusing on sales individuals that have a consultative approach to things. Because if you brought a salesperson in that purely was just transactional by nature, they probably would never spend as much time actually, uncovering the complexities of a prospect with maybe 30 or 40 different stakeholders in an engagement that goes over 2 years, which probably is something in the realm of what you're faced with. But if you hire or work with, people that happen to have sales skills that are consultative or really relationship oriented in nature, it looks like the most perfect setup that you have. So to answer your question about me and what my time with Mambu was exactly something similar. We knew that we had 3 different real people that we were usually selling to. Because even though we were core banking and we were an API first enablement, we were an API first platform, which is very similar to one API, any investment, which is on your side. We were, lots of APIs, one platform. And we initially thought we were selling a technical solution to a technical audience, but we kept striking out and losing deals when we approached it this way. So what we started doing when we won our first big tier one bank, which was ABN AMRO, we then realized in that sales cycle, we had business actors, technical actors, compliance actors. And so we started breaking out our sales engagements to address those specific types. So we would focus on a functional workshop. We would try to create a technical architecture for them in a second one. We would create a regulation compliance workshop, which again helped to kind of segment out the different, the sales process overall. But that being said, the only way that we were able to make it efficient was if we added tools, materials, resources to be able to make it better and more seamless. So yeah, I guess there's no real one size fits all, but I think the need to understand how you can take your segmented approach to your prospects is extremely important. And I think you also having mentioned some of the workshops you have in your process is exactly the right way of doing it.
And finding the right nuance, right? Because 100% standardize will just not fly in this complex field, right? So there will always be the last 20%, and this is the consultation aspect also of a salesperson that at least at Upvest would be required to shape this and tweak this 100% to the client and their unique situation. And frankly, this is also what excites me personally so much about Upvest, that it's not like off-the-shelf selling of like any product, but that you have to find custom approaches with a standardized solution, so to say, and be able to articulate that well towards the clients in all the solution workshops, etc., that you would have.
I mean, it sounds amazing because you're being faced with so many different types of companies you're selling to, and you probably see so many different propositions, and everyone is probably very different than the other. So yeah, I can imagine. But I want to now take it to maybe back to the past again, because that's all great now. But I'd love to go back to a time maybe when you thought it might not have worked out, because I imagine people maybe listening in right now or looking in or watching, maybe in a situation where they've tried to capture a certain ICP or a certain segment of the market, and they've been met with resistance, they've been met with prospects saying no, they've been met with, I have no idea what you're doing, what are you even talking about? So maybe these people are in this category. And I wonder if there was ever a time like that that you had with Upvest, or Upvest as a company maybe had, and how you kind of persevered, because obviously perseverance is how you've got to where you're at today. So if there's anything on that side you want to share, I'd love to pick your brain.
Let me think about this for a second, but probably most relevant would be the early days of Upvest. So in the beginning, we were a blockchain company, or we were basically selling blockchain technology. Initially, even with a D2C app, then just blockchain as a service. We were then diving deeper into tokenization. And the difference, or the big differentiation, versus 3 to 4 failed go-to-markets versus then the one that stuck was that we were coming too much from our solution, right? So 2017, blockchain was what everyone was looking at, and everyone was getting hyped about this technology, very aggressively, basically. And we were also a little bit part or subject to this, and we would be selling obviously our nice tech and the solution that we had built on blockchain, and we're trying to fit it to some problem instead of starting with the problem. And we were lucky that we pivoted within the blockchain space to, again, tokenization and basically financial instruments in a wrapped, tokenized way, and had exposure to financial institutions who were then telling us about their real problems, which is when we discovered, okay, what's actually missing is not investments on blockchain, but investments in a digital form. And this is, I would say, the biggest difference. And the perseverance came, I would say, from the storytelling, because also behind the blockchain go-to-markets, we always had a very compelling or good story to tell. And this is the reason why we, quote unquote, survived so long in the early days. But with the investment API, storytelling met substance, and suddenly this became a super powerful go-to-market. And while it took 18 months or 12 months or so to go live and get the licenses, which wasn't an easy time because you wouldn't get much reward for all the work that you were putting in because you're essentially not live.
Yeah.
Everyone could see what we were doing and why we were doing it, and I think that kept people so motivated because we were solving an actual problem instead of educating someone about a problem that they didn't have.
I think that's admirable because a lot of people, founders, would look at a situation and try as much as they can to prove their theory, which I've seen many times, which isn't a bad approach, but of course it takes a bit of a longer road than if you actually listen to what you're selling from your prospects and clients, and you are hearing what they're actually asking, and then as a business you're able to actually change and pivot into what they need. It's just a natural, really nice flow, right? So I think that's really admirable that you were able to manage that, kind of gap. And I would, encourage anyone that maybe is listening in right now, if there is being met with resistance, it's usually one of three things. It's either you're focusing on the wrong ICP and there's a different ICP that could need the solution you're bringing. It could also be potentially that the value narrative around what you're communicating should be maybe amended towards the needs of the prospect, or potentially there's a need for a pivot or a shift that you might need.
I'd say we realized product market fit when I was able to just very fact-based functionally describe what we are doing and how this fits into the client existing infrastructure and what this means for the end users. And the client or prospect would tell me what the benefits are, right?
Yeah.
You see the spark in their eyes, and you can see that you've communicated the benefit just by sheer factual impact that you are communicating through the means of your product.
Yeah.
Just an amazing feeling, and which is obviously not always a given. I think we had a very good timing and a very good product team to build it in a way that we have built it right now.
Yeah.
But I would clearly see that also in hindsight now, I would sense that in the first 3 years we might have not been on the right track.
Yeah, but it's interesting because I'd say a lot of businesses would probably feel that way. But I think it's been really great to see your where you're at now and the growth you've had, which has been tremendous. So now, I have two more topics just before we kind of wrap this up. But the next to last topic I'd love to discuss however you want to reply, of course, is if you could go back in time and do something different. I know it's always a bit annoying to think because you can't go back and change the past, of course. But if there was something that you could go back in time to see what you would do different, what would that be? And maybe what would the outcome, how would Upfest be maybe different today if that thing had been done?
Also very good and not the easiest question.
I can imagine.
Maybe starting with the growth team because it's just a little bit closer to me and my daily work right now. Over investing into foundations early. I was talking about the processes and making sure knowledge is shared. But what I also mean is literally the sales materials, well-crafted answers, the basis for RFPs, so requests for proposals or requests for informations. So all these content bits that you reuse over and over again. And training and incentivizing a go-to-market team to always go the extra 20%, right? So by nature, every seller would usually stop with the workshop that ends, right? They wouldn't naturally, some will, right? But in the grand scheme of things, not everyone would say, okay, now I take another hour to make this deep dive that I created for client A a fully standardized template so that my colleagues can use it. And we've introduced those team principles now, in hindsight, a little bit too late, that we would individually go those last 20% because it benefits us as a team and helps us to sort of automate the progress of the foundations that we have and that everyone benefits from. On the Upvest end, look, with every decision, I think there was a couple of times where we could have said no earlier, or literally when the logo or the brand against a potential prospect was too large for us to ignore. So we kept holding on to it, we kept pushing, but it was kind of clear that we weren't there yet from a product market fit perspective. So rather spending this time on prospects that would have fit our state back then better. But yeah, overall, I would say we always found a decent path at least. Like you can never hit everything the right way. And testament to that is that we are now live with these clients and they works. But probably saying no is would have been a good thing.
I can empathize. I once spent, I probably would, a very significant amount of time on a very large German bank, which I won't mention the name, but it was back in 2017-ish, and we had spent a lot of time helping them create a brand new neobank. And it was amazing because we thought, wow, major bank in Germany, neobank proposition, how exciting. This is going to be the next wave of customers that we'll be working with. How this is amazing. And it took even weekends. It took working many, many hours and involving pretty much almost every single product tech person in Mambu to just make this happen. I mean, there was over 45 different stakeholders in this one project, and the project was so secret that they made everybody even sign personal NDAs. This is how intense it was. So I'm being very careful with what I say right now. But long story short, we got to the very last point where everything was fine, and they scrapped the project. And it was very last minute. Yeah. And you look back in hindsight, and you're like, if I had just saw that this was a tier 1 bank and this is how they operate, and it's okay for them to throw this amount of money at a project and then have it scrapped, you can qualify in or out. So I feel very much similar in my world as well. But look, Alex, last kind of question is the future of go-to-market and the future kind of maybe even the industry that you're in, fintech investment world. I mean, it'd be, if I didn't mention the word AI, I'm sure everyone would be, not believing this is an actual live conversation, but I know AI is definitely probably something in the future. But realistically, if you think about what does the future of go-to-market, sales, investment, however you want to answer that, I'd love to get what you're seeing in that world.
Yeah. I think we talked sufficiently about like the quality that's needed in the sales processes, right, to sell regulated infrastructure, and this won't change. So you will always need to have this sort of knowledge and again, quality, value with every touch point that I described earlier. So necessarily throwing more people at the problem just won't work, right?
Agreed.
So you need people who have a certain seniority and experience to be able to sell this type of complex products. Now, the good thing is that technology is heavily advancing, and I think AI can be an existential co-pilot or co-worker in that approach. Yeah. So one on the knowledge collection, so automatic transcripts, etc., recordings. Obviously, then the knowledge sorting and making sure that the knowledge is accessible to everyone in the company, right, in real time. Sharing objections and the way that they are met across sellers, etc., already works right now, and we have that, but we don't have it in this context-based manner that LLMs are able to do. Second one would be literally, if you look at AI, a sparring partner on approach, pricing, on slide decks, RFP answers that are AI-based. It's something that we see a lot emerging right now. Always going to be a human in the loop. If you don't have that personal element, it's still a people business. And if you're not meeting people with people, I don't think that you are able to sell these multi-dimensional large deals. Yeah. This will persist, but I think it will get a little bit easier on the mundane tasks that sellers usually would have had before.
I agree. I think that's spot on because I'm seeing even left and right a lot more of this sales co-pilot world coming about. And to your point, I'm seeing people using it as a way to kind of automate all of RevOps and so on, and have it be that each salesperson gets a list of what they have to do throughout the day, and I'm having others essentially use it as actually a mechanism to help them prepare for meetings. The use cases kind of go on. But in a nutshell, Alex, I think that's been really great overall. Anything else do you want to say before we end it, or have we covered all the points that maybe were most important for you?
Broadly covered.
Cool.
What was your take on AI and how it will influence the market?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'll tell you a personal story. So the other day, was asked, I got connected to a new startup that needs some help with their go-to-market. And before I could speak to the CEO, I was asked to make my initial 30-minute intro presentation to a bot before I could have the conversation with the CEO. And I will tell you, it's weird. It's very weird. It is not natural by any means to talk to somebody, but I will say it was a very reassuring bot. It gave a lot of compliments when I said certain things, so I'll take it. But I think that's a little bit of an extreme case. I don't think that's going to become the norm. I think that's for, really time-strapped people that need to offload some of that initial kind of such, which in my case made sense. I have a theory, and my theory is I don't think we're going to live in this world of just AI talking to AI. I know everyone's saying this is the way it's going, but I think particularly in enterprise sales, and particularly in all the things you've just described, we're going to see a return back to human, with AI making that more efficient. So like you said, all the things, notes being captured and stored, onboarding, or any kind of automation that you have for orchestration of processes, creating those processes, really anything that you have to do as a task, and will actually create more space for people like you and I to talk and speak and use our brains a bit more, which maybe what some other people share, they don't share. But I do think that people will buy now from people more than they have before, because I think before we were just swamped with people everywhere. The hard part, though, will be getting to that human interaction, because we won't be able to quickly just have a conversation anymore. You'll have to talk to a bot first. So look, I think we've come up in the time. I know we could probably talk about so many more things, but I just personally want to say thank you. It's been really great to see your journey. It's been really great to see Upvest's growth. And I have no doubt this is the beginning of another huge, big success that's already on the making. So thanks so much for joining today, Alex. And thanks for everyone listening in.